Hello and welcome to Cooking the Books with Heather. Today I'm really excited because we are starting a new book. This is our first recipe from I Am From Here, a book by Vishwesh Bhatt. He is an Indian American. He grew up in India and moved to the United States in the South when he was 18. So he didn't grow up here, but he has chosen to live here and to cook with the ingredients and some of the techniques that we use here in the South. So it's sort of a mixture of Indian and Southern, and I'm looking forward to trying out some of these recipes. But it was a gift for Christmas, and I was super excited to try things. So we'll see how it goes. The very first recipe we're doing is kind of boring, but we need it for the next recipe we're going to do, and decided to go ahead and make it for you guys. We're going to be making what he calls perfect rice. I haven't cooked rice really on the stove in a very long time. Well, occasionally. I made a recipe with my son that called for cooking it on the stove, so we did it that way, even though we could have used the rice cooker. I have a very cheap rice cooker that I bought a while back just to be able to make rice quickly for our family, and it does a pretty decent job, although it is probably needs to be replaced soon. We'll see. But it's hard to get rice that's, even in the rice cooker, sometimes it turns out a little bit sticky, not as fluffy as you want, and I'm not sure exactly why. But he says this is perfect rice, and we will see. I need a double batch for the recipe I'm making tomorrow. And it needs to be cooked and cooled, so I'm just going to make it today, and we're going to use it tomorrow. But he says that this will work, that it works just as well in a double batch as a single batch. So these are all the ingredients I need. I have water. I have rice. This is basmati rice, or mainly basmati. I added a little bit of other long grain white rice just because I didn't have quite the right amount, but it'll be fine. You can use any long grain white rice for this recipe that would work with the proportions and the timing and all of that. So, and salt, and that's it. But the first thing I need to do is, you can see I have my rice in a strainer. I'm going to go rinse it. And rinsing rice is something that I didn't do when I was a kid. I do it sometimes now, but the recipe calls for it. I think it helps to reduce sort of the stickiness and get more of a separated grain, but that could just be coincidental based on other factors. I make my daughter make the rice in the rice cooker, so that's one of the good things about having the rice cooker, is that it's really easy for her to do. But they love rice. This has a whole chapter of rice, so we're going to make rice. Anyway, I'm going to go rinse this. He says to gently rinse it under cold running water, so we'll see. So I rinsed it, I don't know, a minute or two, and now I'm just going to let it kind of drain a little bit over this bowl. And this also has a step that I never have done before for rice. So he says you need to drain it thoroughly. So I'm going to let it go for, I don't know, a couple minutes. It's not really draining all that much anymore now. So it didn't drain all that much after I got it out of here, but that'll be fine. Now I'm going to put this into my pot. Now he says for a single, sorry for the noise, for a single recipe you need a 2-quart pot with a heavy bottom. This is a pretty heavy stainless steel one, and it is 4-quart because we're doing a double batch. And we are adding our water. measured water, measured rice, and it's standard measurements that I've always used when making rice before. And just a pinch of salt. I'm going to put a couple decent size pinches in here because I've never had too much salt on rice, especially not seasoning it before. Now, the thing that he does that is unusual is he says to let this sit for 15 minutes before you cook it. So he says to just put it on the stove without turning the heat on for 15 minutes. So we're just going to set a timer for 15 minutes and we'll see you back in about 15 minutes. Okay, it's been sitting for at least 15 minutes, a couple more minutes with moving everything around. But I'm going to turn it on to medium-high heat. And we're going to let this come to a boil. Now, I'm glad he says that as soon as it starts boiling, basically, as soon as the water starts to boil. So I always second guess myself as far as what boiling means. So sometimes it's like, do I want to wait until it is really, really a full boil or not? We're going to wait until it starts to boil. Medium-high heat. So we'll see how long that takes. I'll let you know. It's been about 4 minutes and it's just starting to bubble. I would not call that boiling, but soon. I'd say we are starting to boil. This is definitely above a strong simmer. It's been about 7 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead. We're going to put the lid on and we're going to turn the heat down to very low. I have a low, but low is really low. So I'm going to go a little bit above that. We're going to set a timer for 15 minutes. But we're going to see you in about 20 minutes because we're going to let this sit. We are not going to take the lid off. We are not going to look at it. We're just going to let it do its thing for 15 minutes. We're going to come back. We're going to turn off the stove. We're going to move it off of the heat. And we're going to let it sit for another 5 minutes before we open it. So we'll see you in about 20 minutes. It's been 20 minutes. So 15 of that on the heat, 5 of it off the heat. And now is time for the moment of truth when we finally open it up and see what we've got. Well, it looks like we have rice, potentially fluffy. Oh yeah, it's relatively fluffy. It's certainly all of the water is gone. Very steamy. The grains seem to be separating pretty well. I would be happy to serve that. You do not have to fluff it with a fork. He says if you want to. Now, excuse the dog chewing in the background. Can't do much about that. I need to measure what I need for my recipe tomorrow, which might be the whole thing, might not, and cool it down. So what I'm going to do is spread it out on a baking sheet on like my countertops, or I can put it in the refrigerator, whatever. We want to cool it down relatively quickly. Rice is something that you really want to cool down quickly. It could carry bacteria that can make you very sick. And we are going to eat this at a room temperature tomorrow, so we don't want that to happen. We're not reheating it. So we will show you what this looks like in a pretty bowl. Hopefully there'll be some left that we can try tonight, and let you know what we think of this method and this rice in just a minute. On this episode of Cooking the Books with Heather, you watched me make perfect rice from Vishwesh Bhatt's I Am From Here cookbook. And I will say this is probably the best rice that I've made on the stove in quite a while. I do think rinsing it is a great idea. I still haven't tried it with a regular long grain rice that I normally use, but basmati tends to stay a little bit more separate in general for me. But I think rinsing the rice is definitely important, and I think that it was a decent method. It was a little damp still at the very bottom, so maybe a little bit longer for me. I don't know. Also, it made way more than the recipe says. So the recipe says it makes 2 to 2.5 cups of cooked rice. I think, and I made a double batch because I needed 4 cups, and I think I probably ended up with about 4 cups from one batch. So that was, you know, because we definitely had more than 6 cups of rice, because I'm positive of that. We ended up eating it for dinner, and we had leftovers, and then after I'd put away the rest, the stuff that I needed for the other recipe, and there was still more. So there was plenty to feed 4 people for more than two meals. So I think that amount is not quite right, or at least not for the what I made. I used basmati, and he says it depends on the grain size, but I need to make it just sort of as is and see exactly how much rice it makes, because it was more than it needed to be. But I think if you don't have a rice cooker, this is a great recipe, a good method, and takes a little bit longer because there is that sort of soak beforehand. But if it turns out nice, if it turns out not sticky, not underdone, that's a win in my book. So just needs a little bit of extra play. Anyway, if you enjoyed watching me make this, please give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, share it with your friends, and come back and watch me make something else next week.